Welcome along to Fetch for Accounts Payable Invoices. What we're going to cover today is what Fetch is and what it does. I'll share with you our experience using Fetch in-house in Focus. We'll have a look at how Fetch can help your business, and I'll share a few client scenarios that we've encountered and how Fetch has helped them. This is just so you can get an idea of the sorts of things we can do, what we've been asked for, and how we can work with different processes. And we'll also have a look at the implementation process. So first of all, what is Fetch? It's a cloud-based data capture system. Any data entry done by a business could be at least partially automated by Fetch. People are not usually completely replaced, but the repetitive, boring tasks associated with data entry are. So Fetch currently integrates with MYOB EXO and also Workbench Project Management. And we've got plans for an MYOB Advanced connection in the pipeline as well. For now, though, we're going to concentrate on accounts payable invoices into EXO, but just keep in mind that Fetch could be used for other purposes. So, for example, timesheets, application forms, incident reports, anywhere that there is data entry involved. And with demand, we're going to be connecting into more end-user software as well. There are two parts to Fetch. The initial data capture is done using ABBYY FlexiCapture. ABBYY processes more than 9 billion pages per year worldwide, and New Zealand's Department of Internal Affairs and Inland Revenue departments both use ABBYY for various purposes. So there are entities with very robust security requirements using the same engine as Fetch does. As MYOB partners, we've looked at data capture type products for clients before, but we've always felt there was too much risk having data simply taken from documents and inserted into the end-use software, particularly when we're talking about financial data. So we needed a safety net or a staging area to make sure bad data can't enter the system. And that's where our middleware, Fetch Sync, comes in. This is where we add value far beyond what data capture software can. And being the developers, we can customize to a very high degree for individual clients if necessary. So we'll look at both parts of Fetch today. Like all software that we develop, we put Fetch in-house first. And we had some expected results. The elimination of keying errors. We expected some time saving, and the ability to see the business's financial position in real time because we're processing creditor invoices faster. What was interesting, though, were our unexpected results, the main one being significant time saving, to the point that within 6 weeks, we had staff asking for extra work because they didn't have enough to do. We were able to redistribute tasks from other areas of the business to them, freeing up staff to do other work. One of our staff members had wanted to drop a day's work a week, and she was able to do this without any impact at all on the team. So the impact on Focus has been huge, and it's been great to experience these benefits firsthand. So let's have a look at some of the benefits you may enjoy as a result of putting in Fetch. I've already mentioned some that Focus found, so we'll have a look at what else there may be as well. Costs are reduced due to less human involvement. There's no need to maintain software or servers to run Fetch. There are less errors, which can be costly to fix, and there's no more requirement to key in information at all. We've also got duplicate checking inbuilt, so you can't enter the same invoice twice. The potential for fraud is reduced, and there are several ways of achieving this. So one of them is that you can segregate the duties involved in the process if you want to, and this will make sure that the same person can't enter, approve, and pay an invoice. There's also the ability to run an audit trail to see who has done what in the system. And sensitive information that's on a document can be redacted so that staff can process documents without needing to see any confidential information that's on them. Storing paper takes a lot of space, and there are risks involved with it as well. And if anybody knows that, it's us here in Christchurch. The earthquakes caused a huge problem for offices that had paper storage in only one location. But equally for any business, there are risks with fire, floods, and other natural disasters. Because everything is digital, obviously it can be backed up in multiple locations. Also, for companies that want to go paperless, this is a real plus. It'll work in well with environmental policies. And just from a very practical sense, there's no more paper filing in the never-ending boxes and trying to find places to store them. Because processing is faster, businesses are better able to pay on time, and this could lead to being able to take advantage of early payment discounts and avoiding late payment penalties. Because processing happens faster, you can see your financial position more easily, and this is something that Rod Sinclair, our CEO, has highlighted as a real benefit to him. It's easy to find the invoices. They're stored as PDFs, which are searchable, and they are in a defined folder structure. They're also added to the Documents tab in EXO as well. So the savings are not only from the reduced costs, but also because staff can work on things that grow the business instead of something that costs the business. So Focus as a company have definitely benefited from many of those items listed, as have the clients that we have using the system as well. Let's have a look now at how Fetch works. I'm not going to do a live demo today because I want to share several scenarios, and it would mean I'd have to do several demonstrations just to show you those things. So I'm going to use screenshots, but if you'd like a live demo and to talk about any specific scenarios, feel free to get in touch and I'm happy to organise that. So documents are imported either automatically, and that could be using a hot folder or an email account, or manually by scanning, and they can be in most formats. We can also check multiple inboxes or folders. There's a phone app where someone can take a picture of a document on their phone and it'll be sent straight to the processor. This will be great for clients who maybe don't have access to a scanner or documents that get sent in from the field. However they come in though, the scans will go to the Abbey server, which is in Focus's cloud, and it determines what type of document it's looking at, whether it's an invoice, a timesheet, or a contract, for example. Once it knows what it's looking at, it can locate meaningful fields, extract the data from them, and run compliance and business rules over it. Often manual systems require somebody to look up information, double check things, or do calculations, and Fetch can do these tasks for you at this stage. Somebody's going to verify the data has been correctly read and make any corrections if necessary. And additional data can be added at this stage that may not be on the document. For example, you might want to record and export the name of the person approving the invoice. Now, even this first part has been a great advantage for one of our clients. Their Auckland office had been sending invoices to Christchurch by courier for entering, which for a start is a bit dangerous because they could get lost along the way. But now they can scan them in Auckland and the documents will just turn up in the application of the admin person in the Christchurch office. And once it's been checked, the data is then exported to the Fetch Sync tool. And this is installed on your SQL server, which may or may not be in the cloud as well. And from there, the information will be uploaded into a software application. At the same time, the images are saved and they're stored in a legally compliant and fully searchable format. The sync tool can be set so that only information with no errors will flow straight through to the end-use software. So that means that it just catches the exceptions. Or it can stop everything there, whether it's got errors or not, so that Fetch Sync will act more as a holding area, maybe for a final check before releasing into the software, or maybe there's some other tasks needing done at that time. The users can log into Fetch Sync to fix the exceptions and to do any other work that is needed before releasing the invoices. So Fetch Sync allows us to be able to support features that software that's really just meant for extracting data can't. For example, pack quantities, serialised stock, different receipting processes, and job costing. So this is the sort of thing that the users will see when they come to work in the morning and open up Abby, which is the first part of the process. And I've got a couple of examples of how the workflow can look. The invoices will come into queues for processing. Some businesses prefer queues to be by branch, and a team will just take invoices from their branch queue. Others prefer individual queues per person, so everybody has their own queue. And some businesses don't need a workflow at all, so they've just got one queue for everyone. So this is set up to suit the business. Invoices have been picked off attachments from emails that have come into an inbox, and they've been put here as tasks. So you can see how many tasks are waiting to be checked. How the invoices get into these queues is by rules that we've set. So for example, if the invoice is for Auckland, send it to the Auckland queue. That's pretty straightforward. If the invoice is for more than $2,000, send it to Jasmine for approval. So we can set a really wide variety of rules, just depending on what is required. To open one of these tasks, the user will double click on a queue and the document will open. So this is what they'll see when they open it. At this stage, they simply have to verify that the data is correct. It takes very little time. And this part could potentially be done by a junior person if the volume is very high. So this is the invoice on the right-hand side, and this is the data that has been captured from it on the left. We don't need to set up any templates for supplier invoices to do this because the information is picked up by using keywords. So for example, the words invoice number or any of its variants, and there's a variant there. It just says invoice. That could be anywhere on the page, and Fetch will find it and then use it to find the actual invoice number, which in this case is on the right-hand side of the keyword. So when Fetch sees an invoice from a new supplier for the first time, it's got a high success rate in correctly identifying the required fields. If it doesn't find a field for some reason, the user can show it where it is for that supplier, and Fetch has the ability to learn that for the future. So running down the page now, we can see that supplier has been found and matched in the database. Totals have been found on the invoice. The purchase order has been checked, and we can see that the invoice is for the expected amount. If we want, we can see the purchase order details by clicking the details button. And this information is being read from data that's been synced from the EXO database. The Fetch data sets are updated on a schedule so that they remain current, and only the data that Fetch requires is synced from EXO. The line items have been found, and we're using alternate purchase order numbers, as you can see there, and also we've picked up the job number. On the invoice, job number is labelled as your reference, and we have just let Fetch know that that means job number. We can match items on a purchase order to make sure everything is there. So these lines have been matched off the purchase order. This makes checking items off the purchase order really quick, and given that some have got many lines and with products not in the same order on the invoice, it can be very time consuming to match them manually. So when we click the three dots, we will see anything that has not been matched in this box. There were only 3 things on this purchase order, and they've all been matched, so there's nothing to show here. We can build in a tolerance so that the items will still match if there's a small difference in the price on the invoice compared to the expected price. So here the invoice is for $560, but the purchase order was for $542. We're allowing a 5% difference in this scenario, so this one is showing that there is a difference, but it's within the acceptable range. Here's an example where the difference is more than 5%. So this will require some action, maybe contacting the supplier to find out why there's such a difference. If an invoice is not part of a purchase order and it doesn't have a stock code, it can be GL coded. And that little triangle in the bottom right-hand corner of the field shows that there's a drop down here with the codes. So this field can be made to be automatically filled for certain suppliers by nominating a default code for them. We can code to correct stock location, and you can see the little triangle in the field as well, which shows that there's going to be a pop-up in there as well with choices. And again, we can code a default in there as well. If there are serial numbers associated with any stock item, these can be captured. Keying is not required when you're capturing information that's on an invoice, and I mentioned that before. All you have to do, if I just grab my mouse, is put your cursor in the appropriate field and then drag your mouse to capture the information that's on the invoice. This is much easier than trying to type long serial numbers. So now that the data has been verified and it is correct, it needs to go somewhere. Once the user's finished verifying the information on the document, they will close it. And this usually sends it off to the staging area, which is Fetch Sync, but it could also be set to automatically go somewhere else. So for example, if the requirement is for a double approval of invoices, closing the task would send it to the next person for the second approval. Users can also choose to send a document that they've opened to another queue, along with a comment letting them know why they're sending it, so the team can work together without the need for post-it notes or shouting across the room. Now for one of our clients, the admin person needs to send problem invoices to her boss that need looked at. Before Fetch, she was running downstairs to do that several times a day, so she's got no more running up and downstairs because now she can just send the invoice to her boss's queue with a note. The boss just has to open it, deal with it, and if needed, send it back with instructions. So she's not getting quite as much exercise as she used to, but I think she's actually quite happy about that. So that's the Abby part of the process. Let's have a look at the next stage, Fetch Sync. So a user may have received an email to tell them to log in to deal with the invoices that have some errors, or working in Fetch Sync could be part of the process, so they log in here every day. When they log in, they will see that there are some invoices needing processed. If the client is using multiple databases, they will select the required destination, and this screen will refresh for that database. So they start off by clicking Review and Release Invoice Data, and then they will see the list of invoices that are waiting. Now, if this is being used just to catch exceptions, the green ticks, or the invoices with the green ticks, would have gone straight to EXO and they won't be showing up here. The invoice with the red cross would be stuck here in the safety net, and in this case we can see that somehow the invoice date was missed, so we need to fill it in. And by right-clicking the line, we can select View the Invoice to find the date, and once it's been added, we're all good to go and we can release it. Now when we're looking at these invoices, we can expand the lines, and if there's any serialized stock, we can see that from the color of the line. So the blue line there is showing that that is serialized stock. We can right click on the line and see the serial numbers and also add a reference if we need to. These are the serial numbers from a minute ago that were selected on the invoice, and you can see that Fetch Sync has split them into individual lines, and that's where we can put the reference number. In this part of Fetch, we can view the purchase order if there's anything we need to check as well, and we've already seen that we can look at the invoice, so we don't have to go into EXO to check anything. Now once an invoice is released, it goes into EXO, where several things happen. We can see it on the Transactions tab. So the creditor invoice has been created with serial numbers showing here as well. The inwards goods receipt and the costing have both been done. On the Serials tab, we can see the items and the references there too if typed. And for this example, we put Mrs. Jones and Mr. Brown as a reference, and we left one of the lines blank, so automatically Fetch has referenced the invoice number in there. We can see that the purchase order has been fully processed, and if there are multiple invoices per purchase order, the purchase order will show as being partially processed. The invoice is available to view in the Documents tab, And if the client is using job costing, the items on the invoices have been applied to the job as well. The invoices have also been converted to PDF-A and saved. Now, just in case you're not familiar with what PDF-A means, these are archivable, so no matter how much time and software might move on, they will always be able to be opened. And this is really important when you're keeping documents for years for compliance purposes. So that's what's happened in EXO. I've got a few examples of things that have popped up in our work with clients to show you, just to give you an idea about what sorts of things we've encountered so far. There are different ways to handle receipting, and we can customize Fetch Sync to handle a client's process. I've got a couple of examples here. So in the first example, the stock is receipted in Fetch. The data on the invoices is verified as they come in, and then they sit in Fetch Sync until the goods have been received. And when you release the invoice from Fetch, then the receipting is done automatically. If you need to, you could receipt part of the invoice here if it hasn't all been delivered, and if there are back orders. In the second scenario, the stock is being receipted in EXO by the warehouse as it comes in, so it's not being done by the admin staff at all. Now, in the past, for this particular client, printouts of invoices were sitting in an in tray, and every few days the admin person would pick them up and look in EXO to see if they'd been received. And if they weren't, the invoices would go back in the in tray to be checked a couple of days later. That was a real time waster. Now what happens is the data on the invoices is verified as they come in, and they wait in Fetch until the goods have been received by the warehouse. So you can see the message here saying all lines must be fully receipted. So in this case, the goods are not yet in the warehouse and the invoice cannot be released yet. Now later on, when the user logs into Fetch, or maybe the next day, if the stock has been receipted, then the message and the red crosses would be cleared and the invoice can be released. So the admin staff can now do the data verification anytime and then wait for the goods to be receipted by the warehouse. They don't have to keep picking up the document from the in tray every few days. Now, because Fetch Sync is installed where EXO is, this information is read directly from your EXO database, so it's available to fetch instantly when the warehouse do their receipting. We've got the ability to handle packs, so for clients ordering 36 items of something, but the supplier invoicing one pack of it, we need to be able to convert these quantities so that Fetch can understand and match them. There's a rounding line automatically added if necessary, and we can set the tolerance level on this. One of our clients has an integration into Workbench, which we developed for them. It's not EXO, obviously, but the same functionality that they have could be built in for any client. So this client has a rule that invoices received after midnight on the third day of the month are deemed late, and they'll have to wait until the following month for payment. So we can get the information from the email as to the time it was received and then indicate whether it's late or on time. And so we just populate the field with either pay or hold. The user is then able to manually change the payment date and export this to Workbench. So the payment date gets changed in the system. Now, we don't actually do this automatically, but we could if that was a requirement. The reason that we haven't done it automatically is in case they choose to leave the payment date as it is for some reason, even though it was received late. As an earth-moving company, they've got lots of vehicles, and every vehicle has its own job in the system. So when this registration number field is filled in for a vehicle, the job code is automatically populated in the table. And previous to this, someone manually looked up a massive table to get the job code for the vehicle and type it into Workbench. The Workbench fields activity code and work center can be defaulted by supplier and pre-filled, and this would be equivalent to cost type and cost center in EXO. So when the activity code is filled, the rest of the line is calculated and filled in. Workbench needs the total including GST, so that's calculated at that time. And if the supplier is not GST registered, the calculation accommodates that. At this point as well, approver name gets added into an export field because that information is needed in Workbench. So there are some scenarios. Hopefully you're getting the idea that we can customize and accommodate a wide range of client requests and processes, and maybe it's got you thinking about some of the processes that you have. We have 2 optional modules in the pipeline. The first is on costing stock, which probably doesn't need any explanation. The second is for businesses where products are costed before the invoice arrives so they can be available for sale. When the invoice arrives and the cost of the products is different to what's on the purchase order, Fetch will be able to reverse them out and then recost them at the correct rate. This will also be useful when an invoice arrives with freight unexpectedly on it that needs to be on-costed. So let's have a look at the process for implementing Fetch. First of all, we would conduct a paid scope to help us to understand existing processes and requirements. Depending on complexity, this would take 12 to 20 hours for one database. If you've got more than one database, the additional ones will take a lot less time. We would give you an estimate for that when we're in discussions. The time needed to be on site is usually about half a day, but that depends on the complexity as well. So this scope would allow us to produce the statement of work for the project, and this will give you realistic estimates and timeframes for the work to be done. On acceptance of this, we would start work implementing Fetch. We prefer for training to be on site as well, and we found that the amount of support that's required after implementation is hugely reduced if we've trained on site and on your own machines. So training on site will reduce your support requirement and cost after go live. As far as ongoing costs go, at the end of each month you are charged for the pages that you've used. And to give you an idea of what processing invoices costs you with your manual process, we have an interactive calculator on our website that estimates this for you. All you need to do is put in the salaries of the staff that you have processing invoices, then add who does what and for how long in the grid. It's only an estimate, so you can just make an educated guess. Then use the slider to select how many invoices you process per month, and you'll be able to see what saving you can expect from putting in Fetch. So these are my contact details. Both email addresses will get me. One of them's easier to remember than the other. If you've got any questions, or if you'd like a demo or to discuss your own specific needs, please get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. To read a bit more information about Fetch, go to the address on the screen. There's also a short demo video there as well. So I hope this answers some of your questions about Fetch. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.